You mentioned earlier that homeschooling was a movement, and I struggled with that wording a little bit, but I'm convinced it is. It's a movement that actually has been recognized in ways that goes beyond what we can imagine. And to me, that describes a movement. It's something that is a thing. It's something that's grown into a thing. We didn't necessarily have an objective of doing that, but it's come to that around the world, home education, family education, homeschooling goes by a number of different words or terms, but it is a thing. It is a movement.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Zan Tyler Podcast, where our goal is to help you thrive in your homeschool journey. Let me take just a minute to ask you to please subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen or watch, including YouTube. And if this podcast has been encouraging to you, please leave us a 5-star review. Each review helps us and helps other families like you find our podcast. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram as well. We post a lot of good content there. I'm excited to have Gerald Huebner back again with us this week. If you missed part 1 of this 2-part episode, make sure you go back and listen. Gerald and his wife, Bev, homeschooled both of their children from kindergarten through high school in their home province of Manitoba, Canada. They began the first homeschool support group in Manitoba 35 years ago, and Gerald went on to become chairman of the board of HSLDA Canada, as well as the chairman of the board of the Global Home Education Exchange. Gerald is an amazing example of a true servant leader and has devoted himself to supporting and encouraging homeschool families around the world and promoting homeschool freedom internationally. So stay tuned. I think you will really be encouraged by this episode. This podcast is brought to you by BJU Press Homeschool. Homeschooling is an exciting adventure we take with our children. One of the most challenging parts of this journey is choosing the curriculum you want to use. BJU Press Homeschool is a curriculum you can trust. All the books, resources, and videos have been designed with you and your child in mind. Their curriculum is educationally robust and rich, taking into account that children have different learning styles, strengths, and needs. Mom, you are in charge. BJU Press Homeschool is here to come alongside and support you. Do you need help with the teaching load, or is there a subject you just don't want to teach? Their amazing video courses are available for all grades and almost every subject. BJU Press Homeschool believes that homeschooling can produce a new generation of students who know God, love their neighbors, and stand firm in their faith. For more information, go to bjupresshomeschool.com. That's bjupresshomeschool.com. So tell us, Gerald, what the plans are for GHEC going forward, or GHECs. Do you think it will continue to grow, continue to be an influence around the world?
I think so, Zan. I think that you mentioned earlier that homeschooling was a movement, and I struggled with that wording a little bit, but I'm convinced it is. It's a movement that actually has been recognized in ways that goes beyond what we can imagine. There's been recently a study, or a commission, I guess is maybe the right word, that the United Nations, UNESCO, has been working on educational issues around the world. And they, for the first time, we can disagree, with various things United Nations related, but they, in the past, have virtually ignored the whole concept of family or parental education. And in their deliberations, it's something that they have actually acknowledged. And not in a we have to shut this down perspective, but they simply acknowledged the reality of this thing that's happening. And to me, that describes a movement. It's something that is a thing. It's something that's grown into a thing. We didn't necessarily have an objective of doing that, but it's come to that around the world, home education, family education, homeschooling goes by a number of different words or terms, but it is a thing. It is a movement.
Yeah, and I believe it's a movement of God. I don't think there's any other explanation for the way all of us, sort of as ragtag individual families around the country, and you in Manitoba, could have ever started something like this on our own. I mean, the only explanation to me is God's help and blessing.
Yeah, and I would have liked to have said that when I was asked the question by the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation when they were sort of grilling us on some of the connections. And they said, "So why are you like in a small town in Manitoba, in the middle of Canada, involved in this thing? Like, how did you get to be there?" And I have to say, it wasn't strategic. It wasn't my plan. It wasn't my way. But the Lord guided and directed, and probably it's a good thing that I didn't know, because I would have run in the other direction at that time.
Absolutely. As fast as you could, as fast as my short little legs would have taken me, I would have run. I would have run. So you brought up an interesting thing that Jan and Roger and I were talking about last night on the phone. And that is in the Ukraine, where you have done a lot of work, a lot of missions work, a lot of other work. They refer to homeschooling as family education. So tell me why you like that term. I know why I like that term, but tell me why you like that term.
To answer that question, I'll quote somebody that was a whole lot smarter than me, in that the quotation by this fellow was that education has little to do with school. And I'm convinced of that education is far bigger than school. And I think the term, I like family education because it gets away from school, which is what we're trying to do. I think homeschooling is okay. It's not a bad term, but I think family education better describes the heart of what we're trying to do, because I think if there's a challenge that people have, it's when they try to run a school in their home, when they try to do it the way that they learned. The first thing that we bought when we started homeschooling was we bought some just beautiful old school oak desks that got used for a day or two, and then never again.
And then the kids just migrate. They might migrate to where you are or where each other are, and work on the sofa or work in the kitchen table and then work on the dining room table. At the end of the day, I used to laugh and think, do I have one surface where we can just eat dinner tonight as a family? But that's kind of the beauty of it, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I like what in Ukraine they call it family education. And I think that's encouraging people to think outside of the school paradigm. And because it simply doesn't fit in the same kind of way. And I think it's just encouraging that. And I like it.
It's funny because when we were starting or joining with the first homeschool group to start a statewide organization in South Carolina, somebody reached out to me from the lower part of the state and said, "Hey, Zan, we're a bunch of homeschoolers here. We had formed a 501c3. We don't need that anymore with what we're doing, so we're just going to give it to you," which was so great because you can do that. We didn't have to go through the paperwork. But the name of the organization was the Carolina Family Schools Association.
Oh, cool.
And this is back in the 80s. And I have to tell you, this is no brag, I can tell you that, just fact. I didn't even understand what they were getting at that point. Now that I've been been involved in homeschooling for so long, you see that the family encompasses everything. It's not one child doing his work. It's a family learning and growing together. And of course, individuals have responsibility and schoolwork to do. But that is so descriptive. I love that they call that in the Ukraine.
It's these paradigms that we have. For many years, I thought about the many new homeschoolers that were starting their journey of homeschooling or home education, and I came to a place of just that I'm not sure what happened to me, but the light went on, and I realized that actually the paradigm is that they're not starting; they're just keeping on going. There's so many people that stop to teach their children and send them off to the public school at that magical school age, versus simply keeping on going. So we've come to start. We're now encouraging the young families with children who are not of official school age,
right,
to enjoy that time and to teach their children, but not to worry about school, and then to simply continue that.
Well, I want to take just a minute to thank our sponsor, BJU Press Homeschool, because they have had such a heart for homeschool parents beyond curriculum development, had such a heart to help state organizations here. But they were also a major sponsor of the Global Home Education Conference in Manchester.
They were, and it was such a privilege to have their support. Without it, that conference just can't happen. And we have people from around the world that, as much as they try, they just don't have the means in their organizations to be able to come. So that sponsorship enabled leaders from around the world to be able to attend.
All right. So, Gerald, I want to talk for just a few minutes about some of your international work that incorporates homeschooling, but is not necessarily just homeschooling. So, I know that probably 5 or 10 years ago, you started planting homeschool seeds in Ukraine. And you did a lot of mission work there through your camping organization. So, tell us a little bit about how that evolved.
I've been going to Ukraine since 1997. In the earlier days, it was related to agriculture and farming, and got to know a number of people. Became involved in Christian camping in Ukraine, started in the year 2011.
How did you go from agriculture to Christian camping?
Well,
so I've always wanted to ask you that question.
It just went back to Christian camping. Both my wife and I had grown up involved in Christian camping. I was the canoeing instructor and lifeguard, and Bev was the swimming instructor and lifeguard at a summer camp. And as youth, like many youth around the world, we did that. The camp director from that camp had gone on to encourage camping in the former Soviet Union, so Ukraine, Russia, a number of different countries. They had all of these former Soviet indoctrination camps that were empty after the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991. And churches started, with the encouragement of this organization, started operating Christian camps. And in the year 2011, after many years I'd been on various boards of camps and things, but I was asked whether I would go to Ukraine and to teach them how to teach canoeing at a boys' discipleship camp. And so I went there and went back in 2014 to help again with some canoeing instruction. And I was there as the canoeing instructor, helping them with that effort. I was asked whether I could help them overall in some of their organizational things. As an organization, they were very dependent on Western money, and they wanted to become much more independent, so was involved in helping them form a national board and develop fundraising within the country of Ukraine. The people that were involved in that, it's largely a training ministry where they're training camp leaders, so counselors, directors, sports leaders, all that kind of thing. And they knew that we were involved in home education. They asked us to talk about it. So in the year 2017, actually, I went to Ukraine along with a number of other countries together with my daughter. And we did the first homeschool seminar in the country of Ukraine that year, as well as Belarus. And we did some things in both Italy and Hungary on that trip as well. At that time in Ukraine, we knew of one family that home educated in Ukraine, and they're still dear friends, and they've been speakers at a number of different conferences now. And homeschooling has grown. The last meeting I had with the Minister of Education in Ukraine last year, there are now over 100,000 children being educated by their parents at home. Now it's a special circumstance. It was in the range of 60,000. It has grown to over 100,000. It's war school. Parents are tired, like they were in COVID, of the online and now bunkers where the children are in underground schools. Parents are tired of that, and so they're looking for alternatives. And there's been several conferences that have happened now. In Ukraine, we had a national conference in October last year where Roger and Jan Smith came and spoke with us as well. And homeschooling is there. It's growing. It's flourishing. They have a national homeschool organization. And it's families being able to spend time together as families amongst and amidst and immersed in the war that's going on.
So, Gerald, how have you? Well, let me ask you this. I know that you've also worked with Ukrainian refugees in Canada. When you help place these refugees into homes or help provide them homes and all of that, do they normally begin by homeschooling or putting their kids in school so they can learn the language?
Well, it's interesting, Zan, because we didn't set out to reach out and bring Ukrainian families to Canada. We have a heritage, both in my family as well as in the Ukrainian people around us. My father was born in Ukraine, and both Bev's parents were born in Ukraine. That's not our interest, just an interesting connection. But what happened was there's a homeschool mom in Ukraine that I had done just a bit of corresponding with back and forth. I've never met her in person. But she wrote me and said, Gerald, if there's families that are looking for help in leaving Ukraine, could they contact you? And so somehow Gerald's name and connection coordinates were on the internet, on Facebook and those places. And we had families contact us. The first families that contacted us were actually homeschoolers. They were families that were homeschooling in Ukraine and then left. We have 4 families that homeschooled, and about another 30 families, some without children, that have come to our community. And basically what we did is we reached out to a number of churches and businesses and said, would you help? And we don't have a committee. It's just an ad hoc thing. But we have over 100 people that have come to our community, which is a population of 1,000. And they've been successful. The formula was basically simple. If we needed to be able to provide them with a house to live in and a job that they could start immediately. And that formula has worked. So far, 6 families have purchased homes here in the community. And several of the families that homeschooled sent their children to a private school that was within spitting distance of their house, Christian private school, mainly so that they could learn English well. And they've done that. They're now homeschooling this year. So we've got them back in the homeschool fold.
Well, that is so encouraging. Joe and I, we were in California speaking at a conference, and on the way home, I watched this movie. I think it was produced by the BBC called One Life, and it was about a young British guy who had rescued like 669 children from Czechoslovakia before Hitler invaded. And that story was so compelling. And like so many of the families you've helped get to safety, it just, it's really our mission as Christians to help family. I mean, to help people. And so I just think what you're doing and what you have done, it has been a real example to Joe and me, and we really appreciate that.
One of the Ukrainian families that you met, Zan, Oksana Kromova from the city of Kharkiv, they're back. They were in England for a year, and they decided as a family that they would go back there. And that's going back into the heart of the battle, literally. They're doing well. They're under attack, and they have a lot. They talk about loud nights when there's lots of attacks, and there have been many in the last week now. But they're homeschooling there. They're encouraging others. Their support group is starting to meet again, and it's exciting to be able to see this place where. When we went to Ukraine with my daughter in 2017, there were no homeschool families in that city. Now despite the war, there's an active support group that's encouraging families to come together in family education in what is, I know, some of the toughest conditions in the world. But they're enjoying that time as a family in the times that they're in.
Boy, that is amazing. Well, Gerald, before we go, I want to ask you a couple more questions. First, do you have a favorite Bible verse or several verses that have really encouraged you in your homeschooling journey?
Probably if there's a verse that's encouraged me the most, it's from Ephesians chapter 2, the prayer for the Ephesians in verses 14 to 21. And it just talks about the purpose and the reality and the power, because we can't do this on our own. We can try, but we need the Lord. And when it ends with the promise and the commitment that our God hears our prayers, that he answers them exceedingly abundantly. And then it goes on to say, in ways that go beyond what we can ever even imagine. And I've seen over and over that God not only answers, but he answers in ways that go beyond what we never even imagined when we prayed. God's got a plan that's far better than ours.
Amen. I love what you said at the very beginning, and I think it describes the journey of so many of us who have homeschooled, and that is we never anticipated making this choice. We never anticipated staying in it for more than a year, and then we certainly never anticipated homeschooling and, for you, international leadership. But boy, isn't it exciting to see what the Lord does? What the Lord does. It's really exciting.
It is.
And I think, gosh, the life I had planned for myself would have been so boring compared to this.
Yeah, I never imagined traveling into a war zone, and we expect, Lord willing, that we'll be back in Ukraine again in mid-October. This will be the 6th time since the start of the full-scale invasion. So if I have a reason for going, Zan, it's to be able to go and see God's hand at work.
That's amazing, Gerald. So, and one more question as we close, and that is, what advice, and it can be several things, but what advice do you have for homeschooling moms and dads starting out? And then I'm going to follow that up with homeschooling moms and dad that just need encouragement to keep going. But for new homeschool moms and dads this year, what's your one piece of advice, or several pieces?
Write down what your purpose is, because it's easy to forget. Why did you start? It'll change. It'll be modified, but write down, why did you start? And it's going to be hard. And that thing that you've written down helps you remember why you're doing this, because it's going to be normal that you're going to want to quit and stop and do something else, because it's not always joyful and easy, but it's worth it. And what helps us in that is remembering that purpose. And if there's something that I would advise those that have been in a longer period of time is keep on going back to that, and be prepared to slightly modify it. You start out for 1 year and you then build it into, okay, we're going to build something longer term for our youth and our kids. That you can build, but go to that purpose and have some scripture that guides that, to say that this is what the Lord has called us to do, and this is what He has promised, that He will be with us, He will answer our prayers, He will be with us, and He will help us in raising His children for His purposes.
So you're like we are now. You have grandkids who are being homeschooled. Has that changed your perspective at all, realizing now we're moving into a generational aspect of homeschooling?
I think it's changed our perspective some, in that we look and realize that the methods, not so much the methods, but some of the materials and the stuff and the ways that our daughter is doing things and son-in-law are different. They don't have encyclopedias. Always wondered what happened to encyclopedia salesmen.
I know, it was a thing.
Well, our grandson, we were in the basement and looking at reading some books, and he looked up and he said, "What are those books up there?" And we got out the encyclopedias, and he said, "Oh, these are really cool. These are like Google."
That's right.
Olden days Google.
Yeah. Yes. But they were really important sources of information.
So, some of the things that we think are, okay, you can't do it without this, or you have to do it this way. It's, again, coming to the heart of, it's not the book, it's not the curriculum, it's not the methodology specific. It's the heart of why are you doing this and what are you trying to affect in the lives of your children, and encouraging that. And for us as grandparents now, it's a matter of how can we help that? Is there some special project? Is there something that we can take on something? Bev did a unit with our oldest granddaughter where she did a marine biology unit with her, and they did a lot of it over Zoom. Had some discussions every week and assignments back and forth. We try and do special projects, but yes, our perspective changes to be more of cheerleaders and encouragers.
Yes.
Versus directors.
It's so funny. I was listening. I think it was Andrew Pudewa on his podcast said, I've decided my major purpose as a homeschooling grandfather is to bring joy to the life of my grandkids. And he said, and when I bring joy to them, I also bring joy to my children. And it kind of brings us full circle, because that's what you talked about when we began, was just the joy of being together.
Yeah, and I think if there's a piece of advice, it's to take a deep breath and have fun. Now, joy and fun are two different things.
True.
Fun is an experience. Joy is a decision. And I think we decide that this is going to be joyful and purpose in that and work forward.
Well, Gerald, thank you so much. And let me ask you this. If there are people who want to get in touch with you today after the podcast, how can they do that? Where can they find you? Not in the encyclopedia.
In terms of contacts, I'm on Facebook. I'm in a number of different places, so you can find me there. I can give you my email if you want.
Oh, whatever you're comfortable with.
Probably.
But if you email Gerald, he's going to have you working in some capacity somewhere in the world.
So two things. One is that if people want to follow along some of the specific things in Ukraine, while we're in Ukraine, we have a Facebook page called Ukraine Prayer Team, and they can follow that along. But if you just send me an email, for those that don't like Facebook, because I know there's a lot of you, Gerald.Huebner is Huebner @me.com, and you can find us there.
Well, Gerald, thank you so much for being here today. I know you've encouraged these families like you have encouraged Joe and me for so many years. Like we were talking about in Manchester, we are on Team Gerald. So thank you, and please give Bev our love.
Will do. Zan, thank you so much.
If you want to get in touch with Gerald, you can find him on Facebook or email him at gerald.huebner@me.com. You can find me at zantyler.com and on social media. Thanks so much for being with us today, and may God continue to bless you and your family in your homeschooling journey. Until next time, bye.